It's time to pour out a box of Fruity Pebbles for your homies because it's the final week of You Can't See May. And we are wrapping up with WWE Extreme Rules 2012 from April 29th in Chicago, Illinois. This show was nominated by Justin Trekker at patreon.com/wrestlingwithregret. It's the first pay-per-view after WrestleMania 28. Of course, the main event for that show was the once-in-a-lifetime bout of John Cena versus The Rock. And a lot of things have changed across the landscape in WWE. We saw once in a lifetime. We saw the end of an era with Triple H and The Undertaker. We saw the beginning of the era of people power as John Laurinaitis became the general manager for both Raw and SmackDown as the result of that big tag team matchup, Team Teddy versus Team Johnny. And, truly the era of the most boring authority figure and the most irritating authority figure of all time is truly running wild here in early 2012. 14,817 people packed the Allstate Center. 263,000 pay-per-view buys is up big from the 209,000 from the previous year. Michael Cole, Booker T, and Jerry Lawler are on commentary here. Cole is still a heel in 2012, but not nearly as much as he was a year ago. He's just mildly annoying at this point. The opening matchup's a Falls Count Anywhere affair as Kane takes on Randy Orton. Hey kids, Kane's back, and he's got a new mask. Two, in fact. Kane came back earlier in the year with the big welder's mask. Take that off to reveal the red leather mask and the wig attached to it, trying to tell John Cena to embrace the hate, destroying Zack Ryder, stalking Eve Torres in the process. For Kane, it all built up to a match at WrestleMania with Randy Orton, and Kane ended up winning that matchup here, but the feud was not done yet. Orton and Kane kept staying in each other's business after WrestleMania. In the Blast from the Past episode of SmackDown, a few weeks before this pay-per-view, Kane took out Cowboy Bob Orton, luring Orton into a trap. I mean, the one time he shows back up for TV, what'd you think was going to happen? My favorite part of the build is Orton tries to get revenge, so it's like, ooh, Kane attacked my dad, so I'm going to attack Kane's dad. Look at this, Kane, it's Paul Bear. I've got him all beat up and bound and gagged in this wheelchair. What are you gonna do about it? And Kane's like, I don't care. You can do with him what you want. And Orton just shoves him into a meat locker and we never see him again. Thanks for coming, Paul. The fight begins after about a minute of brawling. Kane brings out the lead pipe, which has been used a few times in this build. Orton takes it from Kane and starts swinging. Wow, we can hear Brock Lesnar guy. He's very annoying. And now these fighting into the crowd, Orton with the advantage at first, driving his knee into Kane's face, but only a 2 count. Kane with a running basement dropkick to the face on the floor. All right, go off then. Kind of looks like a claymore to me. Now they're fighting up the stairs for a bit, back down and near the set. Orton hits this dropkick to Kane, but so self-sacrificing because of the concrete floor. They fight their way to the back even. They fight into this room where some of the wrestlers are watching the show. We see Zack Ryder, we see Primo and Epico, we see Abraham Washington, and perhaps others. Ryder actually jumps Kane in the room. They've had beef for a while at this point. That helps Orton fight back. Cameraman down. They finally fight their way back to the ring. The crowd's fired up, and so is Orton. He brings in a chair and gets to thwacking. Back on the outside, the announce table is ready for someone to go through it, or perhaps draped off it for a DDT. Back in the ring, we get a superplex by Orton. The RKO attempt is countered with a choke slam and a very close kick out. Kane looking to tombstone Orton onto a chair, but Orton slips out, hits the RKO on the chair to win. I really enjoyed this one. I think it was a strong start to the show, and this is something that I was reminded of having just watched Backlash 2024 a couple of days before filming this review. Something I talked about then, and I will reiterate here. I just kind of forget how good Randy Orton is, not just at the straight up, just nuts and bolts wrestling side of things, but how he can do in a brawling type scenario, because we saw that Backlash, with Bloodline and whatnot. We see it here with Kane, two of these solid, dependable, lifelong hands in the company who are very versatile and have that chemistry. They can do that WWE brawl style and make it look very fun, and they just have a great chemistry where nothing really looks sloppy or bad. It was just a really fun, chaotic brawl fight to start the show, a real exploration of the space, as it were, and I think that was very fitting for a show like Extreme Rules, so I think it definitely checked all the boxes for me. Backstage, the general manager of both Raw and SmackDown and the executive vice president of talent relations, John Laurinaitis, is watching the show with his new executive administrator, super heel lady Eve Torres. Eve's plan a surprise. In comes former SmackDown GM Teddy Long, who is now Ace's indentured servant and also wearing a giant name tag. For the first time, we've seen this. Why? He's bringing out some champagne, and the heels have a toast to change and people power. Ace gets a phone call from Triple H and retreats to a more private space. What could that be? You know, one of the real fun things about watching all the old Raws and SmackDowns in preparation for these pay-per-views is you get to kind of reacclimate yourself to the what's going on at the time in the company and like who are the hot new acts they're trying to push and introduce to you. And you get to watch some of these gimmicks in their real infancy phase, and you kind of remind yourself, like, oh yeah, these things, like, this is what it was like when it just started out. I'm not entirely sure if I'm better off having being reacclimated to these things, but here we are. It's the Funkasaurus, Brodus Clay, who is accompanied by Cameron on the left, Naomi on the right, and Hornswoggle as he takes on Dolph Ziggler, who's accompanied by Vicky Guerrero and Jack Swagger. Poor Ziggler is being thrown to the wolves in this one. You just look at this matchup and know exactly what his role is on this show. But the crowd in Chicago is very pro Ziggler. We get a Let's Go Ziggler chant early on. Swagger with an early distraction, allowing Ziggler to drop kick Clay out of the ring, and the All-American tackles Clay on the floor. Ziggler continues to apply pressure. Hornswoggle doing his damnedest to fire Brodus up because the crowd sure isn't trying to help. Dolph tries to go for a suplex for some reason, but the Funkasaurus powers out and hits the clotheslines. Swagger's knocked off the apron. Clay headbutts Ziggler in the gut in midair, and Dolph takes this ridiculous bump off it. I love it. Clay with the splash and the win, and the baby faces dance, dance, dance the night away. I give it 1 star out of 5. This was a short and sweet matchup here. I mean, it did exactly what it was meant to do. That was just kind of be another accolade, another accomplishment for Brodus Clay. The sell job by Dolph after that headbutt was incredible. I had to rewatch that bump at least 5 times as I'm watching this show. I will say I did have patience for the Brodus Clay gimmick when it first dropped. I was like, okay, it's silly, it's fun, let them have their fun. And then like WrestleMania happened and he did that big dance number with like the dancing grannies, the dancing mamas on stage. And I was like, yeah, I'm done with it. Earlier in the show, they spun a wheel to determine the stipulation for the Intercontinental title match, and it lands on tables. Big Show seems fairly confident, and Cody Rhodes blaming Teddy Long for the spin. Why was this literally the only time the wheel ever got used all show? Because we saw it in the backstage skit, and you think, oh, they have the wheel here, maybe that'll lead to something. And nope, it was something that you used earlier in the day. They don't even use it later on in the show. And it's only to determine one stipulation match. Like, if you have the wheel there, spin it a few more times. It's time for that tables match for the Intercontinental strap as the Big Show defends against Cody Rhodes. Cody was the Intercontinental champion and spent weeks and weeks just taunting the Big Show over his rich history of WrestleMania losses and gaffes and other silly moments over the years. And so the big twist at the end was that at WrestleMania, the Big Show finally beat Cody. He won a WrestleMania match on his own to become the new Intercontinental champion, and then Big Show getting some revenge on Cody by spending several weeks mocking Cody for it in similar fashion to what he did for the Big Show. But that's what brings us to this rematch here. My goodness, the height Cody gets on that back body drop. They're on the outside. Show is showing off the strength. He sets up a table when we get one of the most bizarre interactions on commentary I've ever heard.
Now, when I used to bale hay back in the day on our farm, that's how I used to throw those bales.
You used to do what? You were a farmer?
He's talking about his stomach.
What?
Cody with a disaster kick off the table, which was so cool, and all I could think of when he did that was, man, what if he just put a little extra pressure on it and slipped and his foot just like whoop, and he went through that table, match would have been over. Show is beating Cody up some more. He gets on the apron. Cody drop kicks him, and Show plants his foot through the table below, which counts. Cody is once again the Intercontinental champion. He's celebrating. Whoa! Show gets his revenge by chokeslamming Cody through a table, then picking him up and throwing him out of the ring and through another table. Holy crap. It's cool to see him get up under his own power afterward. It's a pretty big babyface move. Like the way they did that, like the way he got up, the fans applauded him. Even commentary kind of put him over. And so it's kind of surprising it doesn't really lead to anything like babyface wise. Not yet anyway. But I'm going to give the match itself 2 stars out of 5. Seeing Cody just kind of, work circles around Big Show, kind of just running around him to make Show look strong, I think was well done. And I thought the finish of the match, given the parameters and everything, was pretty brilliant. How is Cody Rhodes going to possibly get Big Show through a table? And they pull it off that way. And I think it's just it's just a really creative way to get around that and put all this heat on Cody, which they kind of undo with the way he gets up after being thrown out of the ring through the table. But still a very fun match in that way. Matt Striker's in the promo zone with Daniel Bryan, who's met with a wave of yes chants, which are still relatively brand new and a lot of fun. Bryan says he is better than Sheamus in every way imaginable. He gets more girls, his beard is more manly than his. He compares the Chicago audience to Sheamus and saying that they're overrated and unoriginal. He's smarter, he's in better conditioning, and will win the belt for a second time tonight. He leads himself into a yes chant and walks off as his recent ex-girlfriend AJ Lee looks on from a distance. And we go back to commentary. You hear Jerry Lawler saying, "I think everyone here is saying no." I'm like, are you what? No, they're clearly saying yes. 2 out of 3 falls for the World Heavyweight Championship as Sheamus defends against Daniel Bryan. At WrestleMania 28, it was the bro kick heard around the world, and this was definitely one of the most controversial matches, it seemed at the time, for WWE, when Daniel Bryan went in as the world champion and lost the belt to Sheamus in 18 seconds after getting a smooch from AJ Lee on the apron. Single brogue kick, that's all she wrote. It drove Daniel to the brink. He blamed it on AJ with her unlucky smooch and broke up with her in the process. Meanwhile, Sheamus is in the crosshairs of John Laurinaitis, who's been making his life hell. Sheamus taking his aggression out on the referee Chad Patton at one point, which gets him a $500,000 fine, lol. Sheamus also is on permanent probation, meaning that if he lays a hand on a referee again, he is fired. Also, yes, yes, yes. The yes chants have truly taken off. They've gotten their hooks into WWE, and there is no going back, like WrestleMania and then the Raw after Mania when they're yesing over John Cena's promo at the end of the show, and yesing throughout Mania itself as well after that opening title match. I mean, that was the proof that, yes was the hot new thing. Definitely embracing it here. It was still new and novel at that time, and it definitely helped add to Daniel Bryan's character as he was becoming more unhinged, dealing with the weight of being a champion and then losing the belt. Sheamus is the babyface, but gets booed heartily in Chicago. He goes for a bro kick very early on, shades of Mania, but Daniel gets out of the way. There's some quick back and forth. Sheamus has Bryan in the cloverleaf for a moment. Daniel using his quickness to regain control until he's slammed hard into that barricade. Bryan's able to take back over, wears down the champ, stretching him out a bit. He has till 5, ref. Sheamus finds an opening and starts laying into Bryan now. Sheamus is sidestepped, takes a header into the turnbuckle. More back and forth. Bryan keeps trying to go for his newly rechristened yes lock. Sheamus spills out of the ring. The arm attacks continue. Bryan lays in tons of kicks in the corner. He ignores the referee's count, gets disqualified for the first fall, but he's got a smile on his face because it's all according to plan. Even though he loses that first fall, he cinches in the yes lock right afterward. Sheamus fights it for the longest time but passes out. Referee giving the second fall to Bryan. Bryan goes on a yesing spree as the ringside doctors check on the champ. He slowly makes his way to his feet and is able to go on. Daniel goes in for the kill, but Sheamus with a brogue kick out of nowhere. Slow crawl and a cover, but we get a kick out. Big kick to the head by D-Bry, another kick out. They're fighting in the corner. Bryan goes for a diving headbutt, nobody in the pool. Sheamus with an all-time brogue kick to Daniel. He covers for the win and retains. I give it 4.5 stars out of 5. This is a brilliant physical match. I think that these two guys, their styles together make for a really compelling fight, and the 2 out of 3 falls element did such a good job helping with the story of this one. Just the strategies and the tactics you saw from Daniel Bryan and how it almost helped him win, and and where it ultimately ended up. It was just great stuff. This is what I wanted the WrestleMania match to be. This is what I, and I'm sure a lot of other people, were very excited for when that match was first, billed for Mania, and then that match happens and we're all kind of pissed. And so in the grand scheme of things, you can say that, okay, it was a fine storyline point, or it's like you can justify the WrestleMania match by what they do later on. But at the same time, like, did you really need the 18 seconds, bro? We didn't want them to be chumped out that badly. Hey everyone, why is this on pay-per-view? Santino Marella is watching two jobbers out in the ring and invites the great Khali to watch. 2 is greater than 1. 2 is greater than 1. Sadly, Aaron Relic and Jay Hatton won't be getting too many words out as Ryback makes his way to the ring. Hey everyone, remember Skip Sheffield from the SummerSlam 2010 review? That one big bald guy who was in the Nexus? Well, soon after SummerSlam, he would suffer an injury in a match and go back to developmental for nearly 2 years before being brought back, and Ryback is the end result. He just recently debuted and was going on this run of squashing these local talent, these jobbers on television who all got really weird mic time before being interrupted. That was the big trend. It was very reminiscent to like when Braun Strowman got his big run a few years later. It was like random jobber comes out and just like gets to talk, which is so weird that they would get that time anyway. And then Ryback comes in and destroys them. And that's pretty much what happens here. We get a big Goldberg chant to start the match off to give an idea of what the fans think about this new gimmick. Ryback deflects the early attacks and proceeds to lay both men out, stacks them both up, and pins to win. I'll give it a half star, I guess, being generous. Again, why is this on pay-per-view? It's doing perfectly fine on television at this point. We then cut to a man who would end up being a very large part of Ryback's career in CM Punk. He's being interviewed by Matt Stryker. How's the WWE Champion doing after the constant verbal attacks and emotional warfare by Chris Jericho? Punk saying that Jericho's been trying to prove he's something he's not, but all it's been proving is what a sad man Y2J himself is. Punk says he's going to prove he's the best in the world in front of his family and 20,000 of his closest friends, and that tomorrow Jericho will wake up with a hangover because he'll have put him to sleep. Once again, the WWE Championship is not going to headline a pay-per-view, but at least the match itself kicks all sorts of ass. It's a Chicago street fight as CM Punk defends in his hometown against Chris Jericho. These two had a title match at WrestleMania. Punk came out on top with that. Jericho, though, has upped the ante and is starting to go after Punk in his straight edge lifestyle, poured whiskey over his face, breaking a bottle over his head. I love that Jerry Lawler on commentary decries Jericho for doing that to Punk on Raw, but like, dude, you did the same thing to Jacob the Snake Up back in 1996. What changed with you, man? Also, the seriousness of what Jericho is doing to Punk as he's doing it is minimized slightly when he goes to throw a punch and immediately slips on all the alcohol he just spilled. Jericho wants to send Punk down, quote, the dark, lonely road to alcoholism. He says that his father passed down his alcoholic genes and has been trying to set Punk up to drink ever since then. Like when they were doing his shows in England, like somebody caught cell phone footage of Punk walking into a pub. Ooh, what's he doing there? Drinking perhaps? And then on the go home episode of Raw, Jericho gifts Punk a basket full of liquor. He thinks he's seeing Punk drinking by himself in the locker room, so he sets him up to pass a field sobriety test in the ring. The whole segment goes Punk acting very tipsy, can't do the basic things, and so the cops are like, well, we think he's drunk, and then they leave. But then Punk's like, well, now that it's officially over, I'm going to show that I could do it all along before I'm stripped of the title by Johnny Ace. So he does that, and so he passed, but he didn't. That should have been it, and Ace should have just like stripped the title off him like he said he was going to do. But then like Punk doing the after one, it's like, oh, that shouldn't count. Like, you can't Bugs Bunny your way out of this shit. You failed the official one. I love you can see they're both wearing the jeans, the street fight uniform, baby. You know it's going to be good. Punk gifting his bandana to his sister in the front row. Punk is all over Jericho for the first several minutes. Chris comes back and driving a kendo stick into Punk's stomach, hits that triangle drop kick to the outside. They fight out there for a bit. Back inside, Punk goes for a running knee lift, but misses the target and tumbles back outside. Jericho taunting Punk's sister. She responds with a slap. Jericho lunges after her, which sends Punk into a rage. Goes for a pile driver on the floor, but Jericho counters with a backdrop drop. A little botch when Punk slips on the rope mid-springboard, saves himself just in time to get hit with a kendo stick. Jericho goes under the ring and procures a can of beer. Olympia, man, you really want him to suffer, don't you? He pours one can on him, he takes a drink out of another one, but Punk comes back. Jericho does a couple of spit takes. Punk goes on this big run, goes up top and gets crotched. Superplex is blocked. Punk gets the elbow off after all. The lion salt is blocked. GTS attempt is stopped. Jericho throwing Punk into a chair in the corner. We get a little bit of lion tamer before we get the walls of Jericho. Punk crawling to the corner, pulling out a fire extinguisher, sprays Jericho in the face. Jericho laid out on the announce table. Punk goes up top and hits the shittiest looking elbow drop through the table. Michael Cole almost makes a swear. Punk with the Anaconda Vice, but Jericho grabs a kendo stick and thwacks Punk with it. Codebreaker with a chair assist, but Punk still kicks out. Jericho wants to hit Punk with his own GTS, but Punk slips out, throws him into the exposed turnbuckle, hits a GTS of his own. The big win for Punk in his hometown. I'm going to give it 5 stars out of 5. I really enjoyed this matchup. This gave you everything in this street fight, because you had the physicality, you had the callbacks, you had, the catharsis of the babyface getting over on the self-righteous bad guy who's trying to rub the alcoholism in his face and taunting the family and all that stuff. I think it was just a really great street fight. Would have been better if you had the blood with the jeans and everything like a street fight. Maybe. We get enough blood in the next matchup here, but I think this was still a very entertaining street fight. There's a recap of the pre-show where Santino beat The Miz to retain his U.S. Championship. Then elsewhere backstage, Eve Torres walks in on Beth Phoenix and the Bella Twins, which has Nikki, by the way, is the Divas champion. Last week on Raw, Nikki beat Beth in a lumberjill match after Beth hurt her ankle in storyline. Eve breaks the news that Beth is not clear to compete. Beth vows she'll get her title back. Eve telling the Bellas that Nikki will be defending tonight with a surprise opponent, but don't worry, it won't be Karma. Oh man, remember Karma? So the Bellas make their way to the ring, Brie saying she's glad the title's back in the family. Nikki promises she'll be the longest reigning Divas champion in history. Well, maybe not this reign, but you will be right one day. So who's the challenger? It's Layla, back for the first time since last year's Extreme Rules when she suffered a knee injury. Layla's on fire at first. She goes up to the second rope. That's where we get this big trip and fall after some help from Brie. Nikki targeting the leg with a sparkly knee brace. Layla hits a crossbody. Brie gets up on the apron and starts talking trash, and just the way you can hear her talk as she's falling is pretty hilarious.
Nikki kicks out. Watch out! Here they go!
We get twin magic at this pivotal time. Bree's in the ring now, but it backfires. Layla hits the neckbreaker, crazy sell, the cover and the win. Layla is the new Divas champion. I give the match 2 stars for 2 Bellas. It was a shorter match, but I think the ladies did a good job there. Told a good, quick story with Nikki and Brie working together. Extra points just for Brie's selling of getting knocked off the apron and then how she takes the neckbreaker at the end. I just thought it was a neat little match, and Layla's back in the thick of things, back from injury, and she's champion again. Matt Striker catches up with Johnny Ace backstage, wants to know what he was discussing with Triple H earlier. Laurinaitis repeats he and Triple H's job titles and says it's none of Matt's business, but he'll have more to talk about on Raw tomorrow. He's ready to see this next matchup here, our main event. It's Extreme Rules as John Cena takes on Brock Lesnar. So, quick bit of background. As we know from WrestleMania 28, The Rock beat John Cena, and that whole thing was, it was a match he couldn't lose. He was so determined and obsessed with winning. Anything less than winning would be considered a cataclysmic failure, and that's what ends up happening. He loses the matchup, and so on the next episode of Raw after Mania, he's cutting this promo, he's thinking about his future and everything, when suddenly we hear, well, first off, we hear a lot of people chanting for Brock Lesnar. Then all of a sudden we hear Brock Lesnar's music play for the first time in 8 years on WWE programming. And after his time leaving to go to the NFL and then the UFC, Brock Lesnar is back in WWE. And if you've watched this channel long enough, you know that one of my favorite wrestlers / time periods is early Brock Lesnar, like his first couple of years on main roster TV, some of my favorite work I ever saw anyone do. And so I had a soft spot in my heart for Brock Lesnar. I was bummed when he left at WrestleMania 20, and I'd always wanted to see him come back. And so when he did show up, I thought that was awesome. And I was very excited to see what would happen with Lesnar back here. Lesnar makes an immediate impact when he shows up and just hits an F5 on Cena from the get-go. The following week, Cena retaliates by slapping Brock in the face. Brock pops him in the mouth and busts his lip. And this is a very heated exchange from the get-go. They're making it very clear at the start of this run for Lesnar that he's not in it for like the fans or the glory or anything. He's in it because he likes the money and he's good at what he does. And that's pretty much it. It's strictly transactional. And so you're kind of painting him already as this villain because he's also being pushed by Johnny Ace. He's there to legitimize WWE, and he calls himself an ass kicker and how he's claiming John Cena's not legit. And he's also been given total immunity. He's apparently not going to be punished for attacking any officials or anyone else in WWE. He will receive no consequence. And there's this other big storyline point here where Edge shows up. This is the year he was inducted into the Hall of Fame. He shows up and he makes this impassioned plea to John Cena. You have to beat Brock Lesnar. You have to wake up because the future of WWE is at stake. Gosh, where we keep hearing that. It's Lesnar's first WWE match in 8 years, but is dressed in his UFC gear complete with the sponsored shorts. Cena's wearing the old padlock and chain, a glimpse of the Cena of old. Within seconds, Lesnar busts Cena open to the top of his head with some stiff-looking elbows. And for the first couple of minutes, it's just Cena is just getting the dog crap beat out of him. And every time he gets back up, Lesnar just beats him down some more. He's repeatedly checked on by the ringside doctors. He is bleeding profusely here. That's why Jericho and Punk don't bleed in the street fight, because they're saving it all up for this. At one point, Cena collides with Lesnar, who lays out the referee right behind him. It's all Lesnar for a while, who's just toying with Cena, tries locking in the Kimura lock a couple of times. Lesnar grabbing Cena's chain, wraps John's legs up with it, and is literally hanging John upside down on the ring post. That is a crazy visual. Another fun visual is Lesnar picking up the referee like a duffel bag and throwing him into the ring. Cena goes to the FU, but Lesnar slips out and hits the F5. Oh no, poor Charles Robinson knocked out again. We finally get a new referee and only a 2 count. Lesnar lays out John Cone. Lesnar grabs the steel steps and stands tall, but Cena ever the defiant one. Lesnar with the Kimura lock again, but John powers out, slams Lesnar into the steps. He goes to the top rope leg drop, but gets none of it. Lesnar waits for Cena to get on the apron. He goes off the ropes, jumps off the steps, and flies into Cena, almost killing himself in the process. How did he not die? After that happens, Cena appears to have wrapped the chain around his fist. Lesnar goes for it one more time. Cena blasts Brock in the face, stalking a groggy Lesnar. Cena gets him up, hits the AA on the steps, the cover, and the win. I give it 4 stars out of 5. This was another just very physical matchup here. Violence assured, and the fans were into it all the way. I will say though, man, I was frustrated then, and I'm still a little frustrated now that Cena went over on this one. I get it from a storyline perspective, from a character perspective. Cena needed to have a big win after losing to The Rock the previous month. I get that, but I don't know. I felt that with all the hype of Lesnar coming back, what a big deal this was to get Brock Lesnar back after the way he left the last time and how there was still so much left, on the table, it seemed, with him to come back. For him to come back in this big way and immediately lose that first matchup, I think took the wind out of Brock's sails for a long time for that. I mean, it just felt like, he was just brought back to lose to Cena, who had this kind of negative reputation about him for burying people. It's like, Jesus, we're getting this again. Obviously, there would come to be a time where we would all get sick of Brock winning too many times, but that was definitely a time where I felt, man, I think Brock really should have won that one. And I disagree with the fact that Cena went and won it. I get it, but I don't. And so it's one of those ones where somebody had to win, I guess. After the match, Cena gets a mic. He honors Chicago's history as a wrestling town. He puts over how hard the rest of the roster works and says if he needs to take a vacation, so be it. He thanks the fans for a hell of a last ride. A last ride. And of course, the real joke about that is he takes no time off. He's like feuding with John Laurinaitis and has a main event match with him 1 month later at Over the Limit. And I don't think he really ever leaves all year. So not sure what that's about. My grade for Extreme Rules 2012 is an A-. What a solid show this is, man. I think there's so many good matches on this show that really, take advantage of the theme of Extreme Rules. There's great brawling. There's just great wrestling on display. You get a little bit of everything on this show. And I think, most of the matches were really awesome. There were some smaller matches on the show that ultimately didn't seem to be a very big consequence. And that was just kind of window dressing for the bigger spectacles. I mean, every one of those last 3 matches were just fantastic in their own way, and it was just a really just kick-ass show, kind of from top to bottom. And again, during a time period where, for me, my viewership and my interest in watching current WWE was beginning to wane. Like, Brock Lesnar coming back did make things exciting again. And so for that point in time, I think it was definitely a shot in the arm that was needed. And this was definitely a fun show to go back and relive and rewatch. It's definitely a better show, in my memory at least, than what WrestleMania was the previous month. Well, that was the end of You Can't See Me. 5 solid weeks of Cena-related content. We'd seen the good, we'd seen the bad. We've really gone up and down with the leader of the C Nation these last 5 weeks. Thank you so much for your watching the programming here in the month of May. I know it wasn't Hulkamania, but maybe next year. But either way, the month of June is going to be slightly themed as well. We're going to take a left turn into TNA Town. And so for our next classic review in 2 weeks, we're looking at Slammiversary 2005. I'm Bryan Zane, and I'll see you next time.